Now, another question is, you're talking about the personal statement section now, part A and part B. And I do understand that you have sort of discussed it, but the question is, the part B says that why do you want to do an LLM? And then why do you want to do an LLM from Harvard? And how does it correspond to your career goals? So now I have a specific question as to how do you differentiate this answer to almost everything that you have mentioned so far, talking about your career goals, talking about your academic interests, because if at all you have to tell them that this is why you want to do your LLM, you have to talk about your academic interest, and you have already spoken about that particular question in a very detailed manner right above that question. Then how do you sort of differentiate your answers?
Again, the running theme in everything I have said here today is that Harvard is looking for human beings, not robots. That's how you differentiate it. Harvard is looking for human beings, not robots. Let me speak about part B first before I talk about part A of the personal statement. Part B says, tell us why you want to study an LLM, right? At Harvard. Let me pull that up. The question, please tell us something about yourself. Remember that you had the opportunity to talk about yourself in your personal statement, in your academic interests, in your career goals, in the additional information. Remember that your entire CV talks about yourself. Remember that the entire personal information section of the application talks about yourself. So you've pretty much exhausted everything you need to say, or everything you can say about yourself, right? But that should tell you something else. Harvard wants you to spend the bulk of your words on part A. That's the first thing it should tell you. Harvard says part A and part B should not exceed 1,500 words, but at least half of the word count should be in part A. At least half of the word count should be in part A. And then you find that you've spent your time throughout the application talking about yourself. There's very little you can say about yourself anymore. So be smart and make sure you spend your time and the words available talking about part A of the personal statement. That's the first thing a smart person would see from that. That's the first thing I saw. I was like, I've already told you about myself. Everything in this application is about myself. What the hell am I going to tell you now, right? Even though part B has three specific questions that must be answered, right? But those are questions that can be answered. I answered mine in less than 250 words. So I spent over 1,000 words on part A, right? My part B was less than 250 words. And when you're answering part B, it is not so much about yourself anymore. It's about why Harvard, basically, right? It's not so much about yourself anymore. It's about why Harvard. Why are you looking to do an LLM at Harvard? And how will doing so connect with what you've done in your past and what you've done and what you plan to do in your future? In other words, go back and pull up your CV, go back and pull up your academic interests, pull up your career goals, link them up together and connect them with what you're coming to Harvard to study, right? But don't tell us what you've told us in your CV. Don't tell us what you've told us in your academic interests. Don't tell us what you've told us in your career goals. Tell us something different. What have you not said? Or when you look at what you said in your academic interests, your career goals, remember that they were all about yourself. But let's ask ourselves the honest question. Have you ever found a human being who made it in life or in their career by themselves? No man is an island. So what I'd expect to see in part B is Harvard brings together people from what? Over 100 countries every year. I'm going to build relationships with these people, right? If Harvard admits them, that is to a fair extent saying that they're the best of the best from wherever they're coming from. Now, Harvard will put me in a class with these people. That's why I need to be at Harvard, because I need to be in a room with these guys who are the best of the best from the world, right? I need to build relationships with these guys because my career going forward will be dependent on the relationships and the networks I have built. That's how I answered it. Now that answer is not in my CV, it's not in my academic interest, it's not in my career goals, it's nowhere. But that answer helps every other thing I've said. Because there's a piece of work I'm doing now. How did I get that piece of work? A classmate at Harvard had someone who said, oh, I'm looking for some work, some lawyer in Nigeria who can do X and Y. Oh, I know Kenneth, right? And I'm doing the work. Why did he know Kenneth? Because we sat together in the same Harvard law class. Well, technically, we're PhD students here now together again, but we sat together in the same Harvard law class, right? And so those relationships, to be honest, you can only build relationships with Harvard alums if you're in Harvard, right? So you want to get to Harvard so that you'd have the opportunity to build that kind of relationship with these guys. Harvard has the reputation for academic excellence globally, ranks amongst the top 10. So this is where you begin to make Harvard feel good about itself, you know. So why Harvard? Come on, really, why Harvard? Why not Harvard, right? If you look at all of the rankings, Harvard is always up there. The professors are internationally renowned. They're the best in their field. So if I really want to be the best at X, then I need to learn X at Harvard, right? Because really there's nowhere else I can learn it. Then there's the culture, because Harvard has this very beautiful cultural exchange. They have an international day where you learn the cultures of all of that, of many of the people in your class and all of that. So the cultural exchange, the academic exchange, intellectual exchange, making friends, networking with people, right? And I can beat my chest boldly and say that the connections I made there, to a very large extent, have been carrying me so far. Because, for instance, if I need letters of recommendation, I can call with a day or 2 days notice. That's how friendly we've gotten. And if I need, there's some piece of work I was doing that required a lot of cross-jurisdictional analysis. And I just popped into our class page and say, yeah, guys, who knows this? And someone says, oh, it's my country. And I'm like, all right, do X and Y. And the person did X and Y and got it back to me. And I move, right? So those kinds of relationships with people whose work you can trust, because I mean, these guys are Harvard alums, so they know what they are doing, right? So if you want to build relationships with this kind of people, Harvard is the place to go. If you want to learn from the best, Harvard is, and I say this, please, Cambridge, remember that I am talking about Harvard. If I'm talking about Cambridge, I'll say the same things about you, so don't revoke my admission, please. Right, because I'm here talking about Harvard when I'm a current student at Cambridge. So you've put me in a very tight position here. Right, so if you're looking to learn from the best, you go to Harvard. So say all of those things. Why Harvard? Pretty much tell them why Harvard. Harvard is the best there is, as far as the US is concerned. The professors are internationally renowned. There's a rich cultural exchange. They admit people from they try to make sure it's as diverse as possible, from multiple countries. So you meet people from pretty much all corners of the world there. You connect with them, you build relationships with them, and it's a relationship that's lifelong. And so those relationships will help your career, because at the end of the day, let's be real. 70 to 80% of the jobs in this world are gotten on the basis of relationships. Your grades only count after a friend has said, look at that guy or look at that girl, right? Only in very few instances that your grades start with you and carry you through. Usually it's someone says, I know someone who is nice for this job. And look at Pranjal. And then they say, oh, okay, Pranjal has nice grades, amazing. And then Pranjal gets the job. But remember that they didn't look at Pranjal because they saw your CV somewhere. They looked at your CV because someone said, look at Pranjal's CV. So those relationships are very important. So achieving your career goals are dependent on your network, really. So building those networks, those are the kinds of things you should say in your part B. Talk about why Harvard is the best in the US. Talk about the professors, talk about the rich cultural exchange, talk about the networks. because for me, I feel like that's one of the greatest assets in the LLM class. The fact that you have people from everywhere, really, and you relate to people from everywhere for 1 year. And then after that, you have groups online, Facebook, WhatsApp, you have your emails, you have your annual alumni programs. For instance, every January, I head to London to rekindle. So there are Harvard alumni everywhere. Every January, we go for just some drinks, across the world on the same day. So we're posting up pictures. Oh, here we are in London, here we are in Lisbon, here we are in Lagos, here we are in South Africa, in Cape Town, in St. Lucia, wherever, right? And those things help you connect, right? And it helps. So for me, that's when you're talking about how doing so connects with what you're doing now, what you'll do in the future. That for me is the networks. For me, that's the punchline. But that's my opinion. I mean, someone else can have something that's exceptionally brilliant and write it there. So this is just my opinion based on what I did and that worked for me. Then coming to part A, all these things I've said about part B, in my opinion, can be sufficiently written in 250 words or less. I've done it. I've seen people who have done it and have gotten into Harvard. Okay. What they're telling you essentially is spend time on part A, because that's where the work is. That's where you prove that those interests you mentioned are really your interests. Because if you've mentioned interest in X, Y, and Z, but you're writing an essay on B, then there is a fundamental disconnect. If you said your interests are in corporate law and finance and mergers and acquisitions, but you're writing an essay on the politics of what's it called, of Black Lives Matter, you're not being serious, right? It does not connect. There's just no connection, right? So it says, describe an important issue in your field of interest or a current legal problem facing a particular country, region, of the world, and then propose a theoretical framework or legal analysis or strategy to address this issue. There are 2 questions there. 1, discuss a problem. 2, a solution, right? But there's something at the beginning of the first problem, the first question. It says, briefly discuss a problem and then tell us a solution. Now, I've reviewed applications for friends and mentees who, assuming they wrote 1,000 words, used 70% to talk about the problem and used 30% to talk about the solution. It's not going to work. I've seen people who describe the problem so elaborately that the problem became enticing in and of itself, right? Don't do that. Identify the problem, describe the problem, and let us know why it is indeed a problem. Because if someone does not appreciate, merely stating a problem will not give someone a sense of why you think it's a problem or how significant that problem is. And remember that the person's reviewing your application may not necessarily be from your field of interest. So you need to write something they can understand, right? So when you state your problem, try to describe the problem as clearly as possible, so that whoever is reviewing your application can get a sense of what the problem really is. And also try to give them a sense of why it is a problem, the significance of the problem, how it affects people, how it affects parties, how it affects regulators, how it affects government, right? Or how it affects your country or region, whatever. Just try to give them a sense of why it is a problem, right? And remember that it's not a problem if a solution exists. So you need to find a genuine. So it really has to be your area of interest, because for you to know it so well to that extent, you must have some interest in it. And if you write on it and it's not in your areas of interest in your application, you see there's a disconnect somewhere. So ideally, you should spend, let's say you're using 1,250 words on your part A, right? you should spend that 250 really just identifying the problem and describing why it is a problem, right? And then the bulk of the 1,000 should go to your solution. Now, I know that's difficult because essentially it's asking you to think out something new, but that's just really how they get a sense. Remember that everyone applying comes from different countries, different academic backgrounds. In some countries, the academic ratings are a bit tougher than those in other countries. And so someone who made a first class in a particular country may not necessarily make a first class in another country, right? So the only way for Harvard to give all of you an equal assessment is through personal statement, section A of a personal statement. That's where they see your ability to think. That's where they see your ability to write down your thoughts in a clear and concise manner. That's where they see your ability to analyze, your analytical abilities. That's where they see your creative and problem-solving skills, all those fancy skills you listed in your CV. This is where they are put to the test, right? Because they see your ability to identify issues, to identify problems, to describe the problems in concise terms, to estimate the practical relevance or the practical significance of those problems, and then to begin to think out a sensible solution. The solution will not necessarily be practical, but they're at least theoretical, right? In a theoretical world, they would work, right? Maybe there may be some practical realities that may frustrate it at X and Y points, but at least in a theoretical world, they should work from a legal point of view. That's where they begin to see your ability to think out of the box. Because if it's a problem and no solution exists, then you're thinking out of the box because really there's no source material. And what I've found in reviewing the applications I've reviewed for friends and mentees in the past few years is that I honestly found that irritating, to be honest. People think of, say, I'll give an example. They think of an area of law in Nigeria or something in their area of interest that's not yet as developed as it is in the US or the UK. And there are loads of that in financial services. There are loads of that in mergers, for instance. And then when they find such an issue, they describe the issue at length. And when it comes to describing a solution, they, in summary, say, copy this legislation from the US, right? And bring it down here. Excuse me, if the solution lies in mere legislative action, why are you talking about it? It's not that significant, right? Instead, what we should be talking about are the political factors at play that would prevent the adoption of that kind of legislation. Now, it's still in your area of interest, but that for me is a more germane problem, as opposed to just talking about, or just let's copy, for instance, the liability of ISPs, internet service providers. With the US and the EU, you have a framework for liability of internet service providers. Therefore, Nigeria should copy it and enact it as law. That's not a solution. You get my point? And when I see solutions like that that just simply state, go and copy a law, I feel like you've probably not done your research. I feel like you're just wasting the time of whoever is reviewing your application because you've not done the work, really. So you should think of more gem. I remember I have a friend who wrote on rural electrification, and in 1,000 words or less, he designed a model for rural electrification. He said there's a problem of rural electrification in Nigeria. We don't have light in our villages. I proposed this model, and he did a model.
Okay. In
the application, a sensible, workable model. Well, I don't need to tell you that he got admitted.
Yeah, of course.
There's this girl who, there was this decision from our Court of Appeal, one of the divisions of our Court of Appeal, that did a very interesting analysis of the relationship between stay of execution, garnishee proceedings, appeal pending, and just which stays which, and the nature of garnishing proceedings as a separate and independent action. Just very intricate analysis for which the court had to rely on, I think, about 8 amici curiae in reaching its decision. And the decision had far-reaching consequences on the practice of post-judgment practice. That's just gaining enforcement, getting a garnishee order to enforce, and the right of the judgment debtor to apply for stay of execution pending appeal and all of that. And just raised very, very important issues which created new problems, right? And those problems were not problems that we had grappled with in our legal system before that decision was made. But from every sense of it, the decision looked very sensible, right? And she did this very interesting analysis of this decision and identified the problems arising from the decision and gave very, very, very cogent legal steps to navigating that complex web. She got in, right? I have another friend who wrote on, there's a West African project going on. He wrote on it and identified the key problems. I think he identified the key problems. So his structure was, because I helped review his structure was identify the problem in, I think, 2 or 3 sentences, very short sentences, described how important the problem was, the significance of the problem. And he like, another thing, part A is always very structured. So he had the problem, I also did that. I had the problem, I had the significance of the problem, and I had my solutions. Right, so it was very clear. Now, the problem and the significance, both of them did not finish the first page. Right, so it was just hanging somewhere in the first page. Solution started from the first page and continued. That's how much time and effort went into the solution. And in his solutions, he had a 4-pronged approach that involved a mix of both domestic and international law, and very nicely written. Well, he got admitted. For mine, I wrote something in project finance and the assignment of reinsurance policies as by way of security for international finance parties. It was a problem in Nigeria because our insurance regulator had issued this regulation saying you can no longer assign reinsurance proceeds and reinsurance policies, and it became a problem for all of the financiers in Nigeria, really, including the World Bank, the IFC, people who were bringing international private capital to invest in Nigeria, because that was the most, that was the juiciest part of the security package, if I can put it that way, because if you're doing project finance, particularly non-recourse project finance, you know that the project company, it's your entire pool for recovery, the cash stream for which you recover from is the project company and its assets. And insurance policies are taking over the project company. Those policies are reinsured, right? Obviously for the benefit of the finance parties. But the nature of an insurance contract, even though the finance parties may be able to sue on the insurance contract to claim the benefits because it's an exception to the privacy of contract principle, but you note that the money will first pay to the insurance company itself, and then you're now faced with the risk of the insolvency of the insurance company. So for every corporate entity that the money passes to its hands, you're faced with the risk of the insolvency of that corporate entity before the money gets to your hands. And you don't want that. You want a situation where the money is coming from the insurance or the reinsurance company straight into your hands. So you don't want all those entities and the risk of a liquidator or country rules on limiting the amount of money that ultimately comes to you. So what we usually do in transactions is you just assign. Once you sign those insurance policies, you assign the insurance policies to the finance parties. So all rights under it come to them directly. There's no risk of insolvency anymore. And regulators said no more. So the World Bank, ongoing projects frustrated, previous projects frustrated. And it was a problem because the immediate problem was people were withdrawing foreign direct investment from Nigeria because it was now significantly more risky to commit capital. And I wrote and I designed a framework, and I said, come, if they're looking for if the regulator says don't assign insurance policies. What are the lenders really interested in? Not the policies, they're interested in the proceeds, not the policies. So how about you just leave the policies alone and assign the proceeds? You can assign future proceeds at law, right? They're part of assigning properties. And so I designed a framework. I built a framework for doing that. And it worked. I got in. So have a clear structure. Have a clear structure, what the problem is, why the problem is significant, and your solution, right? Spend time. 60 to 70% of your word count should be on your solution. Don't tell them that they should go and copy a law somewhere. No, right? Describe a solution. There should be careful analysis. There should be creativity in your solution. And it must not be a silver bullet type solution, right? If you have one, perfect, right? But just they want to see that you're able to think. They want to see that you're able to creatively think out a solution to a problem in a logical manner. That's what they want to see. And as best as possible, select something from one of the 3 areas of interest. Ideally, the first area of interest you identified. All your areas of interest are so interconnected, then you have some latitude to play around, right? But I think that the key takeaways from the personal statement is, number 1, they want you to spend the bulk of your word counts there. That's number 1. Number 2, spend more time on the solution as opposed to the problem. If they really want to know about the problem, they can Google it. All they need to see is your own thought process about how to solve the problem. Make sure what you're saying is clear. And then footnotes. I remember footnotes. Some people try to write a lot of things in the footnote. Make sure your footnote is only for referencing. Anything that is not the citation should not be in your footnote. Put everything in the body of your work. If it's not going to be, if it's important, put it in your work. If it's not going to be in the body of your work, then don't put it in at all. Don't start writing or making side arguments in your footnotes. Let your footnotes be for citations only. Is there anything to say about that? No.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Kenneth. Thank you so much. I think it was a very detailed discussion, and we we literally dissected the entire Harvard application. And I'm positive whosoever ultimately watches this video will be looking into the Harvard application with a different lens, with a better and an improved lens, and that would certainly help that applicant to make an informed application. And thanks a lot once again for coming here and speaking to us.